Namaste. So in this video I'm going to be using a yoga block and I'm gonna share some tips of how you can use a yoga block when you're doing different yoga poses, and also in order for you to sort of avoid straining any of your joints and ligaments, it can be quite practical to have a yoga block as well for certain poses that are more yin type of yoga. So I have this yoga block, it's just a basic one, and I will show some poses, and this might give some inspiration to how you can use a yoga block. So firstly I'm going to start off standing. So one of the things you can do if you have a problem reaching the floor when you're doing different balance poses in yoga is that you can support yourself, the hand that should be touching the floor, with a yoga block. So you have two different ways you can hold it. You can either use the higher side or you can use it like this. So such as if you extending one of the legs back, and you feel here in this pose that you are not able to reach fully to the floor with the hand that should be touching. So then what you can do is that you take the yoga block and using it to support yourself. Another thing, if you're doing a forward fold and you are not really able to touch the floor here, in typically yoga you could support your hands on your lower parts of the legs, but you can also use a yoga block, and if this makes you feel more comfortable and feel that you have more support, and it might even make you reach a little bit further, because if you're doing a forward fold, it's important that your body is sort of connecting into that you are supported when you are doing the forward fold, you know. So this can actually sort of help in some of the forward folds. Another thing that you can use a yoga block for is in some of the more yin type of yoga poses, such as if you're doing any exercises or where you're doing like hip opening type of postures. So I will demonstrate this. So if you're extending one of the legs backwards, you're keeping the other foot on the floor with a bent knee. In this posture, you might feel that your hips are not really sinking enough to the floor, and you might even need to allow your body to sort of relax into the posture. So what you can do is again to use the yoga block and support yourself on one hand with the yoga block, and then you can keep the other hand on the knee, for example. As well, if you're extending the leg that you are having forward, if you're extending it, you can also use again the yoga block, unless you reach into the floor with your hands. And this also helps in case you have any problems with your wrists or your hands, and you might put too much pressure on parts of your hand and it's not evenly distributed, the weight. So in this posture, favorable, you might want to utilize two yoga blocks, but I mean, just for you to feel you have the support, it can be useful to use one of these. Again, you might find yourself in a bridge pose. So I'm gonna demonstrate this because this is quite useful if you want to hold certain postures in yoga for a longer extended period of time, such as if you're doing yin yoga. So what you can do with a yoga block, if you want to stay in the bridge pose for a more extended period of time, and you want to ensure that you really are lifting up the hips from the floor, is that you basically lean down on the back, and then you will push the hips up towards the sky, and you will put the yoga block underneath your seat bone. So in this posture you will feel you have really quite good support from the yoga block, and this can also help extend the amount of time that you actually will be able to stay in the your specific yoga pose. Another thing, some people, it's quite good to keep your legs up towards the sky and let the lymph system drain, and to allow all of the fluids and stuff to sort of go to the head, like from the legs. So if you have problems with the circulations in the body, this can be quite a good exercise to do. And also if you're doing a lot of like seated work, so you are seated and your legs are constantly like touching the floor, and you are like seated and your circulation is not really active. One thing that you might want to do in the end of the day is to put your legs up towards the sky. And one of the ways that you can utilize a yoga block in that scenario is simply by placing again the yoga block, but you're using the larger side of the yoga block underneath your seat bones, and then simply extend your legs up towards the sky. So there are different things you basically can do with a yoga block. I would say that, it's not necessarily if you're doing, let's say, Vinyasa yoga, where you're having more of a flow in the movements and stuff, but if you want to sort of stay in certain postures for a longer period of time, it's quite practical and supportive to have a yoga block that you can utilize. You could also, if you're doing any core exercises, you could potentially hold the block with your feet on both sides of the short ends, and you can fold your legs towards the floor and then raise them up towards the sky, which will help to sort of activate certain core muscles. So I will demonstrate this. This is not a particularly, let's say, yoga posture, but if you want to build muscles and strength in your core, quite a good exercise to do. So take again the yoga block, and as I said, place it between the feet, and then you're just going to lower as far as you can, keep your lower back touching the floor, and then you're just going to raise your legs up towards the sky, again holding that yoga block as you're doing this. So as I have sort of gone over some of the things in balancing, I'm trying to think of other ways you can utilize a yoga block. Like me, typically what I would do with a yoga block, bridge pose, quite nice if you want to stay in the bridge pose for an extended period of time. As well, if you're doing balance type of postures, really good to support yourself. Another way of using a yoga block is if you are doing any side type of postures. So for example, in this one, you can utilize the yoga block to support yourself unless you are able to touch the floor with the right hand next to the right foot. Also, if you're doing a little bit of a hip opening type of posture, what you can do again is to take the yoga block, place it wherever you need support, or you can also put your hands obviously to the floor, but this again is wherever you might be in your practice. you can basically just utilize the yoga block here. I would also say that another way is to support the legs in certain postures, such as if you have, let's say, knee problems, you know. Some people are able to, like, they can't really extend the knee like fully straight because it will sort of be too flexible at the back of the knee. So you could also use a yoga block to sort of help support the knee in certain postures. Let's say if you're doing a ninja pose like this, if you feel like it's too much strain on the knee of the extended legs, you can also use the yoga block to support right underneath the knee. And this might also help you to sort of relax in the posture, because if you are holding your muscles tense around the knee, it might be more difficult to actually get further into the posture. And then what other ways you can utilize a yoga block? Let's say you're doing some shoulder opening type of exercises. You could also there again use a yoga block. So if you have any form of, you know, like bench or like a table or something, you could place the yoga block on top and sort of, let's see if I can do it on this one. So you will take your shoulders or your elbows, and then you're just going to lean forward with your head. And this is actually opening the shoulders. And this can be quite intense, so I would recommend you to be careful, because sometimes your lower back might be a little bit put to too much strain, as well with the shoulders. This can actually be quite, I mean, it doesn't look like it's so much, but if you are doing a lot of work in front of a computer and you don't really move, you will feel quite a lot in your shoulders if you try this exercise for like 1 minute or so. Another thing, let me just keep a watch on the time so this video is not getting too long. Another thing you can do, so let's see here. So if you, for example, doing any form of planks, you could again utilize a yoga block here, depending on what you're trying to do. And it's just about, as you go about in your normal yoga practice, whatever you might be doing, if you're doing Ashtanga yoga, Kundalini, Vinyasa, Yin yoga, whatever you might be doing, you will find throughout your practice where you might have some restrictions in the body and where you might need to add in one of these helpful yoga blocks. But because they are so versatile and that you can use them in so many different ways, I would definitely recommend you to get one. And this one, I must say, it wasn't very expensive at all. If I would convert it into dirham, United Arab Emirates dirhams, I would say it might be around 15 dirhams, so very inexpensive but very useful. And you can also use this one if you have, let's say you're going to do a seated pose where you will keep your knees and you will be seated and you will sort of stretch your, let's see here, your top of the legs. You could also use this one to actually sit on it, because I mean, depending on how flexible you are, you have to adjust your level of, you know, yoga poses according to where your body is at. Also, one really good way of using a yoga block for like heart opening and like back type of bending is simply to place, and this is actually something that a very well famous yoga teacher was teaching us on a workshop in Dubai actually. So what I don't know if I should say her name, I might can link it down below, but this posture is really nice for the back, especially if you have any form of work and stuff where you're like seated and you're getting this sort of forward fold with your back, so you're sort of starting to get a like this curved type of spine. The spine is very important because it's where a lot of the, you know, like communication to the rest of the body is going through, and it's very important to ensure that your spine is as healthy as possible because it will determine a lot about how you are feeling and about your just different functions and stuff. So what you can do, basically you take the yoga block on the short side and you place it on the upper part of the back, right at where the spine is located in the middle. And then you're just going to lean back on the yoga block and be careful if you are feeling that you don't really have a very flexible spine. And what this does, I need to sit up in order to say, is that it will open up the heart, so you have to sort of push the chest forward and your spine will sort of extend forward, and you just have to lean back, and it's really good. It will definitely, you will definitely feel if you're doing this exercise every day, but it is very good if you are, as I said, if you have a sort of posture throughout the day where you are seated more forward, and if you want to sort of ensure that your back remains straight for your, you know, for over your life. And then you can just simply sit up. So be careful when you're doing this. You might want to warm up in some different exercises before you're doing any back bends, especially when you're doing yoga back bends, because they can be quite intense. And you want to ensure that your muscles have been warmed up before you attempting back bends. But such as you can do like cobra, upward facing dog, like you can do cat pose. So I would say that definitely invest in a yoga block because they are so inexpensive and you can use them in so many different ways. I mean, if you're doing any other types of exercises, you can probably find multiple ways of utilizing a yoga block. And as I said, in order to sort of getting a little bit further in some of the more flexibility type of demanding postures, a yoga block can be very helpful because it will help to sort of even out the weight and take a little bit weight away from your wrists, especially if you have any problems with your wrist, or in order also to ensure that your back is remaining straight throughout the poses. You shouldn't be, you know, leaning too much forward or doing some strengthening with your back, you know. So if you need, it's better to get a yoga block and ensure that your back, your spine is just maintained in a good posture. So that is one of the things why yoga blocks are so great to basically get a hold on, you know. And if you feel like it's more appropriate, you can also get 2 of them if you want to do some of the, you know, like hip opening type of postures, and if you are attempting to get into the splits. And as I said, you have 2 different, you can use them this way and this. I mean, they are really good because you can sort of adjust it according to what you're doing. So I think I'm gonna end it here, but yeah, definitely check out yoga blocks if you're doing yoga and you are, you know, you find that you are sort of straining your back or trying too hard when you're doing something, because this will just take away a little bit of the pressure that you're putting on your back, and ensuring that you have more support in certain postures. So, namaste.